Yo, hey Brianna. Good evening. Hey Aaron. You know that we stepped it up a little bit on the whole tube side of things when the first people that talk are tube people and not TikTok people. We've brought it up a notch. It's going to be on both, but I don't know how many people are going to be where, so I do too. And if we can get more people over there, we'll definitely start doing it more. It gives, I have more options and, you know, things like that. So yeah. Yep. I agree. Just like being able to talk like an adult. That's fair too. That is 100% fair. Thank you, Jazz. Appreciate that. Hey, Courtney. Dinner's done. Okay. I'll be here. How you doing today? What all are you ready? What? Oh, what am I live on? I'm also on Tube. I'm also on the Tube. The U of Tube. Yes, Annabelle, I am. Making dinner and checking in. Appreciate it. Well, you can ask Kaylee when she gets in. That would be an interesting question to ask her. I'm not a resident of Idaho. I'm just helping spread the reach of progressive candidates in different areas. So I am helping Kaylee let everybody know who she is, and then you guys can go from there. Should be here any moment. There she is. Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Sorry, this is my first time ever actually joining a live that's already happening.
There you
So
go.
sorry, I'm a minute late. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. This morning was very weird. I went live this morning and we all watched the video of Hegseth and Trump talking about the military. So that was an interesting morning. But um, other than
Yeah,
that, good.
it feels like a shift. I had to take my kids to an appointment and we're sitting there watching Hegseth's speech on stage. And just knowing how hard our military has worked to overcome so many obstacles and so many issues that they've dealt with over the last 30 years, and just to have it taken back by somebody who really doesn't understand the gravity of their position is
Yep.
so frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. And Trump's speech after was just I can't even describe it. It was most of us didn't know what the heck was going on the whole time. So um guys, everyone that's on here, just in case you don't know, this is Kaylee Peterson. I had the honor of interviewing her. Gosh, was it only? Well, technically, I interviewed you, I think, a couple weeks ago, but the episode just came out just a little over a week ago, which was crazy that it hasn't been that long since it came out. She's running for Congress in Idaho's first district. Um, and obviously the goal for today is to allow Kaylee to let everyone get to know her, but also to allow you guys to ask some questions. So we're the goal here at A More Perfect Podcast is to open up conversation and especially give some voice to some candidates who are trying to do some amazing things in their districts. And Kaylee is doing some amazing things, and she's she's got some great stories to tell. So thanks for being here, Kaylee.
No, I appreciate the platform. It's funny because right when I joined, there was a comment in the comment section that really drew my attention. Somebody said, "Oh, she's a Democrat. That's all I need to know about her."
Mm,
And I think that really perfectly defines what the work we're doing in the first district is trying to show, which is that you can't tell anything about a person just by the letter next to their name. It's
yeah.
so funny. I have so many people in the state of Idaho who think because I'm a Democrat, I'm a leftist, elitist with big party connections when I can't even get the DNC to answer a phone call. Actually, I've been waiting for about 4 months to try and talk to them about what needs to be happening in rural America. So I've been spending the last 4 years, which is doing the work that my opponent should be doing and hasn't, which is bringing all of the stakeholders in my district together to try and find solutions to the problems that they're facing.
Mm,
But a lot of the pushback we get is you think you can tell so much just by what party that they run with. But I've known Dems who take money they shouldn't and speak out both sides of their mouth, and I know Republicans who are taking back money bribes and doing no good for rural America. So we're trying to put in the work ethic and show people who we are.
yeah. Yeah. So why don't we start with you just letting everyone who's here just get a little idea of who you are, how you got here, and what got you to decide to run for Congress in the first place.
Yeah, so I definitely did not have a traditional trajectory for a congressional candidate at all. I spent my childhood split between Idaho and Connecticut. My parents were divorced. So my family on my mom's side homesteaded the North Eagle foothills where I'm now raising my two kids. I grew up with a single mom. She worked 2 to 3 jobs at a time to make ends meet. When I was a little kid, she slept on the futon so I could have my own
Mm,
room. Like working class family. My dad was a former Marine who went into the Army National Guard and served 2 tours in Iraq. I definitely did not, go high school, college, perfect trajectory into some lucrative profession. I started my family young. My husband and I have been together 16 years. but I was always really, really politically engaged, even when I was young. So as a teenager, I became a public advocate for diverse youth in our foster and school systems across Idaho. I worked with some nonprofits. I managed a local grassroots campaign here in Idaho back in 2008. But when I started my family, childcare became prohibitively expensive. So I became a stay at home mom working on the side. We became a foster family. And it wasn't until 2016 that I think I saw a real shift in how we talked about politics and how we talked about policy and how we viewed our neighbors based on, what party they affiliated or what was on social media that day. So I decided I wanted to get involved again. And I went back to college at 30 years old when my kids were a little bit older to make it a little bit easier. And the weirdest thing happened. I decided I was going to get involved in local politics again. I joined a local Facebook group, and this was about 2 weeks before the filing deadline in 2022. And I saw a
Mm.
Facebook post that the state of Idaho could not find anybody to run as a Democrat at the federal or statewide levels. And they were just asking if anybody would be willing to put their name on a ballot. And I said, you know what, I can do that. Like, I'm going to school. This is what I want to do. I want to get involved in policy. That would be a privilege. I'll put my name on the ballot. But then I started learning more and more about what was actually happening in the district and how districts like Idaho's first had been left behind really by progressive politics for the last 2 to 3 decades, and how there were so many people looking for somebody that they believed in or a political kind of candidate that actually offered them solutions, but they were too afraid to speak out because of the political environment here. So I decided then and there I would run a full congressional campaign and that I would continue to build out the infrastructure and foundation and, level-headed common sense policy people were looking for until we were successful. So this is now my third run in the first district.
Dang. That is, uh, I can't even imagine. I mean, as you well know, most people's idea of politicians and what it's like to be in politics, the concept of doing that 3 times. I know that the first time was just kind of putting your name on it, so it wasn't as running in the same way you are now, but still, just the idea of putting it on that many times is incredible to think about. And I can at least speak for me is I hope we can get more people like you running in more districts, because we need people that really have a passion for what they're doing. And I know from the first time that I got to speak with you that I could see that passion. And that's one of the reasons I really enjoyed the interview, but also wanted to do this, because I wanted lots of other people to be able to see how in many ways we need our candidates, our politicians to look at things, to be all that stuff. So and I want to say this to everyone in the chat. So what I'm hoping for is that I'll kind of talk with Kaylee a bit, just to let her walk through her story a little bit. If there's questions that you want to ask, if there are any of the mods that are in chat, if you could kind of pay attention, and if any good questions get asked, in probably like 15-20 minutes, we'll start answering any questions that people have. And if there aren't any, then we'll just keep talking. But that's how we want to try and do it tonight. So one of the things that I think that a lot of people are interested, because I think a lot of people don't know much about Idaho. What kind of things, what do you want us to do? So hold on to them, Kia, and then when we open it up, just kind of like, I don't know, paste them back into chat and link them at the top or something like that, and we'll kind of go through like that. What kind of things do in your time going through Idaho for the last 4 years, what kind of things can't pin while you has a guest? Well, then just write it back in and I'll see it. I'll be paying attention. What kind of things do people in Idaho, what are the kind of things that people care about in Idaho when you're going through? What are the things that matter to the people of Idaho?
Yeah, this is One of the things I wish everybody understood about a lot of our Western districts, like Idaho's first, is just how large geographically and population wise the first congressional district is. So we're one of the largest by distance. My district is 500 miles long. It goes from the Canadian border all the way down to the Nevada border, but it is actually the largest in the country by population because we were this close to a third congressional district after the last census. And we've had a mass influx of just a huge population growth in the last 10 years.
Mm.
So the thing I wish people understood is how different parts of my district are. Because really driving up my district, it's almost like 4 geographically different states with entirely different geography and demographics and population and industries and lifestyle. And I think that's what makes our district really tricky is when you have somebody like my opponent who's so narrow-minded. I mean, he is just Freedom Caucus talking points, nothing outside of that. He flies the Christian nationalist flag in front of the Idaho flag out in front of his congressional offices. But what we really need is somebody who understands how to take the perspectives of all these different stakeholders, because public education is a huge issue in Idaho right now. We spend the least per student. We have crumbling educational infrastructure. We have schools that aren't ADA accessible. We're even struggling just to get school bus access to a lot of our rural children. So education is a big issue. And they keep talking about wanting to increase the workforce by criminalizing abortion in the state. That is the only solution that they have offered. Instead of looking at investing in our schools, our teachers make like $30,000 a year. Our teachers make a fraction of what they can make if they just cross the border and go to Washington and Oregon. So these are big issues. Healthcare is a massive issue right now, especially Idaho was on the front lines of some of the most strict abortion legislation in the country. So we were the first to implement trigger laws with absolutely no exceptions.
Mm.
And almost immediately, we lost over 35% of our OBGYNs. We had a mass retirement of healthcare professionals in the state. My district lost 3 labor and delivery wards. So just even having access to a provider is incredibly difficult. And what this administration is doing right now is threatening Medicaid and Medicare access. So we're already losing rural clinics. Our rural hospitals are trying to struggle just to keep the doors open. I mean, healthcare is a huge issue in the state of Idaho right now. I have counties where women don't have a single provider, so they have to travel for hours just to get maybe a prenatal appointment. So
Wow.
those are big issues. But then I think like the rest of the country, one of the biggest issues for rural America is how impossible it is for middle class, working class people to survive. The federal minimum wage, and here in Idaho, it's still $7.25. And you can say, well, a lot of businesses are paying more than that. But if we were actually increasing the cost of living, then the hourly wage would be closer to $35 an hour. So a lot of Idahoans are making $14 to $16 an hour. And these are for jobs that require degrees.
Yeah.
And then housing prices just skyrocketed. So these are the practical day-to-day issues that I don't think are really unique to Idaho, but that nobody in DC is really actually addressing to try and find any solutions right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned the person you're running against, the current incumbent. How has your campaign been different to his?
So these are.
Do we have enough time to go through how your campaign has been different to his?
He doesn't campaign. This is the truth. This is the truth, and it's happening in districts all across the country. It isn't unique to my opponent, but because he has the R next to his name, he doesn't do campaign. He doesn't do public events. He doesn't do messaging. Actually, one of the things I'm proudest of our campaign doing is forcing him out into the limelight a little bit. So when I started, we've talked before about how I started doing my town halls where I invited specifically Republican voters to question the Democrats. So I held Republican town halls. And he had never done a public event up until this point, and our town halls were getting so much traction that he actually did his first ever tour of town halls back in 2023 in response. So I went to Lewiston, he went to Lewiston, I went to Camion, he went to Camion, I went to Grangeville, he went to Grangeville. The joke is I actually was up in Sandpoint, Idaho, and I jokingly told the people at my town hall I should just announce that Russ Fulcher will be here because he's been following me across the state. And he held a town hall less than 1 month after mine. So my opponent is really able to just use far right special interest talking points without campaigning in any way. And what I wish more people realized is my opponent raised over $650,000 last cycle. The vast majority of that came from corporate PACs and large PACs. And yet I believe 80% of what he spent that money on was luxury resorts and lunches, like meals in fancy hotels. So the amount of money that's being funneled through his campaign into him being able to take a luxury vacation with his girlfriend, like it's really, really frustrating because on the other hand, we are pennies on the dollar compared to any congressional campaign. People see it as an unwinnable race, which we should definitely talk about the fact 2026 is a winnable year. But my campaign is focused on not me. It doesn't really matter what my personal beliefs are or what I think about an issue. What matters is what Idahoans are experiencing across the state and what is going to solve the problems that they're addressing. So I spend all of my time traveling up and down the district, working with all different people across the political spectrum, and then offering legislative solutions that would actually address an issue. For instance, immigration obviously is a huge issue right now. In Idaho, it was really frustrating. Our other congressman had supported a bill that would have streamlined the immigration process for migrant workers. And in a large agricultural state like Idaho, this is incredibly important. But instead of using this common sense policy that was already introduced at committee, they instead went and just bulked up ICE and increased border enforcement, which then dropped Canadian tourism at our northern border by almost 20%, crippling the local economy of our border towns. So, my campaign is about being in the community, seeing what the issue is, and then finding a policy that will fix it versus kind of the career politicians that I think Americans are tired of right now.
Wow. Yeah. Speaking of farming, how have Idaho farmers been doing since all of the tariffs and et cetera have worked their way? Not tariffs and the current deportation policies of this administration.
It's incredibly difficult. And I think what I struggle with our agricultural industry in Idaho is Russ Fulcher, because he's a Republican, has really kind of cornered a lot of our small family farmers into thinking that he's their proponent. And it makes it really difficult for somebody with a D next to their name to try and get into the meetings and to shake and to show them that I'm actually the one on their side. So it's been a lot more difficult to be able to work shoulder to shoulder with our farmers because of that hyperpartisan divide. But they are 100% struggling, and they were already struggling before this. If you look at my opponent's FEC records, he's taking a lot of money from the monopolized ag industries that are a lot of times pricing our small family farms out, whether it's seed or land. So there were just already so many issues. And then obviously ICE and immigration has made it really, really difficult for our Hispanic community to be able to live and work normally. I mean, even our students are afraid to go to school. So that's having a dire impact. And then these tariff policies, they're not just bad for the small family farms that are losing out on deals, but our small businesses are now being priced out of expansion or basically
Yeah.
competition with these monopolized corporate industries that are in a state like Idaho. So it's been incredibly difficult.
So, what do you think? Because you mentioned difficulty in getting your foot in the door because you have the D next to your name with all of these. What do you think the Democratic Party, Democrats in general, can do to get past that roadblock that we're feeling?
It's gonna take a lot. I mean, I've been doing this for 4 years, right? Like I've been on the ground pounding pavement, showing
Yeah.
up at every union meeting, showing up at every VFW and Grange Hall, and it took years for me to build trust, even with the D next to my name, to show that I wasn't just another politician trying to get a photo op and then, leave them in the dust. Like showing them that, I
Yeah.
was genuine. But I think, and my background academically at least, is in messaging and communications and political misinformation. So, one of the strategies that the far right, like in Idaho, we deal with a lot of the far right special interests. So, we have the Freedom Foundation, the Heritage Foundation funnels a lot of money into the state. And what they've done is actually really strategically savvy, unfortunately for us as Democrats, because they made the top talking point for years trans kids, right? So they go after our trans kids or our LGBTQIA community in this state. So then the Democratic Party spends all of its time trying to fight against these bills.
Mm.
But what we're not talking about, and what small rural farmers don't see themselves then in the party's messaging. And it's intentional. They did this on purpose. So even though my policies as a Democrat are best for our rural farmers, for our working class families across the state, when they Google Democratic Party, they're not seeing themselves reflected in what's online or what's on social media, because we're constantly trying to put out these fires with these kind of assaults. I mean, they spent like 70% of a legislative session on LGBTQIA youth and kids in sports, when there are less than 10 NCAA trans athletes in the country, right? So this was on purpose. What our job now is to show that they are welcome at the table, that my policy is their policy, that I will reflect what they need and their lifestyle and their values. I'm not attacking their values in any way. I want to uphold them. But it's going to take a lot of work to undo the damage that hyperpartisan messaging has created over the last 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we got some questions. We answered it a little, but first question we had was, what issues are citizens concerned about in Idaho, which I think we went over just a little bit ago. Do you think any of these problems will or have caused people to leave Idaho?
Oh yeah. 100%. It's actually one of the biggest issues we had going from 2022 to 2024 was after kind of the full-on assault that happened in our state legislature with the policies that were passed. There was a mass exodus
Mm.
of left-leaning academics, physicians, a lot of families that had LGBTQIA members left the state for safety purposes. Families that were looking to expand left the state because they had a high risk pregnancy and it wasn't safe to give birth here in the state of Idaho. So there was a huge exodus. But what a lot of people don't realize is in states like Idaho, we have real estate firms that intentionally kind of headhunt far right talking figures across the country to try and get them to move into Idaho.
Mm.
So, one of the things that we've had that's been really interesting is we are an incredibly popular destination for the redoubt movement and for people that kind of want to live off grid. We have a really large demographic of separatist militant training grounds and kind of militias in that sect. We have a very large Christian nationalist population, especially up north in some of our more wilderness areas. So it's not just that we lost a lot of left-leaning voters or people, but also the influx of far-right people who come to Idaho because of our far-right politics.
Wow. That I can see how that could feel overwhelming when you're dealing with all of that. Um, has your opponent weaponized Christianity as part of his campaign?
100%. I have videos of my opponent speaking at a pretty far right. Uh, it's a church up north that is known for being a political organizing point for far right figures. And I have him giving a sermon to that church, telling the entire congregation that people like me are going to destroy everything that America stands for. We're going to create a Venezuelan communist society, that we are tools of the enemy. I mean, he's literally talking about Democrats being evil. He also mentioned that they should turn off all mainstream media, even Fox, and only listen to One American News Network and read the Epoch Times. So
Oh,
my opponent I have him at a high school graduation with a Bible that was mixed with our Constitution, showing how we were meant to be a fundamentalist Christian nation, and that's what they are going to bring us back to. I mean, it really is just at the center of everything he does.
wow.
But what I try and talk to my constituents about is, do not trust career politicians who wear their faith like a costume, especially when nothing in their life is indicative that they live by a set of values. And I am of the personal belief, my faith and my beliefs are meant to make me, hold me to account. They're meant
Amen.
to make me the best person that I can be. But if I'm going into government, I'm swearing an oath to the Constitution before anything else. That is the top bar. That's what we have to hold ourselves to. So trying to tackle Christian nationalism in Idaho is probably one of the scariest aspects of my job. I think it's the only time that I ever have to, think twice before I go into an area, or, kind of
Yeah.
double check my surroundings if we're in a hostile neighborhood. But it's really important, because I think we're on the brink of something really scary if we can't successfully combat this messaging.
Um, before we go back to the questions, that brought up a question of mine because uh, the event that happened in Utah had literally just happened when we were right before we started interviewing. Did that event and the results of what we've seen since, has that affected you and how you've, like, I can speak from my aspect that it's made me even a little more nervous to walk around in public, and I'm not running for office.
Yeah, the truth. It's hard to answer that, because for me, the last 4 years, so many people don't see a lot of the political violence that was happening behind the scenes, because it didn't reach national news.
Mm-hmm.
In my state in particular, I mean, 4 years ago, I held an event across from the militia event, and I got death threats all down Telegram. We had two Aryan brothers who escaped prison in a gunfight and then went on the run in Idaho, murdering two people on their way.
Mm.
We had a separatist who actually attacked the power grid in my district. That I still remember when the failed Republican candidate hired a gunman to do drive-by shootings at Democratic candidate's home down in, I believe it was New Mexico. And
Wow.
at the time, I was speaking at a democracy symposium, trying to bring the political aggression down in the state. And ironically, a neo-Nazi, he has a publication, and he published how ridiculous I was talking about political violence and being afraid of drive-bys. But then we obviously saw what happened to Melissa Hortman, and we just see such an increase in gun violence and political violence. I can tell you, my family's uh, far more nervous every time I hit the road now. There are definitely some much greater concerns than there were before, especially beforehand. I think my opponent was intentionally ignoring me because I couldn't be successful. But in 2026, we actually have a successful strategy. So
Mm-hmm.
it ups the level. Yeah, I definitely am putting some plans in place before I hit the road again,
Good.
just to make sure that my family's taken care of if something does happen.
Um, being in a red state when you're doing your groundwork, how do you navigate bad faith conversations?
this is like my specialty. Even when I was younger, they used to say I was like the customer complaint whisperer. My trick is just to stay calm, to be kind, and to make it really difficult for somebody who's intentionally trying a bad faith argument to be as kind of what's the word I'm looking for, as negative as they want to be. I've had it plenty of times. I mean, I had one guy who came up to me and he was like, "God, I miss the good old days when women like you weren't allowed in places like this by yourself." Like, that's not a good faith argument.
Oh
But
my
I'll just go,
goodness.
"Oh, what, why do you think that? Or why do you feel that? Or what's your experience been? Or, I'd love to hear about, your experience and why you think that way. Or, let's talk about it." And I think between the smile, and also I don't think it hurts that I'm a younger woman. And I think it's a lot harder for rural Idahoans to be mean, like, when you're trying to be nice. But it's really just kind of basic. I call it the Mister Rogers of politics.
There you
You
go.
just try to rise above and be as kind and respectful as possible, but also knowing who you're talking to, right? I had somebody ask one day, "You want to work across the aisle? How are you going to work with somebody like Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene?" And I said, "Working across the aisle does not mean that I'm going to work with people who are actively trying to destroy our Constitution and our government and our laws and all of these things. It means seeing that a difference of perspective does not make us enemies." So I just do not partake in bad faith conversations that are just trying to rile and get somebody upset and just trying to make it bad. I just say, "Oh, have a great day," or,
Yeah.
"Oh, sorry you feel that way, but, we'll talk later."
Yeah.
But the truth is that I've been able to bring people that I thought were bad faith, but that were just angry and hostile because of their viewpoints. And I've been able to bring those conversations down and then take something productive out of it. And that's where I'm really hoping we can go for 2026.
Yeah. One of my moderators in the chat said that they needed you to open a training course.
I've done trainings actually.
There
I
you go.
think when I started in 2022, I learned so much that I realized I couldn't just be a congressional candidate, that I had to try and use the strategies we were learning, and make it so there were more Kayleys out there. So we've done local candidate trainings, messaging, public speaking. My goal isn't just about my race. My goal is to try and make politics better all across rural America. So I'm in. I'll do a training course any day.
There you go, Kiva. Do you find so this goes back to farmers. Do you find that farmers hold on about how current do you find it do you find Kia, I don't know if you need to rewrite the question. I think you were writing the question in regards to the conversation, so I don't know how to word it. Yeah, it made sense then. If you could reword it in a way, I will definitely ask it because I think it is important. So we'll go to the next one while she's doing that. How do you anticipate the big beautiful bill impacting your area and residents? I know you talked about the healthcare side of things, but is there anything else?
Yeah. Unfortunately, my opponent, the way he's been talking about the elimination of tax on overtime and Social Security and all of that, that was a big talking point for my opponent. But unfortunately, I have a lot of working class families who think now that their overtime is not going to be taxed, that they are going to be getting more take home income each month in order to survive, when we know that's not the case, right? It is a deduction that can be made at the end of year. You have to completely itemize your deductions, which are incredibly difficult, especially for tip workers. So they did a few things in a really smart way. What they did was all of the really hard hitting policies that are going to destroy rural America don't take place until after the midterm elections. They don't take effect
Yeah.
until after the midterm elections.
Yeah.
But all of these so called benefits hit now. So ultimately, long term, what's going to happen is, one, cost of living is going to increase. People are not going to have as much take home income as they think that they're going to have. It is going to decimate rural health care. But and we talked a little bit about this last time. One of the biggest talking points that millennials should be discussing right now is how to take care of aging relatives. Because in a state like Idaho, our nursing home facilities, our memory care facilities, our hospitals, all of these different resources right now that rural America uses Medicaid and Medicare for are going to be gone. And
Mm.
in states like Idaho, adult children are legally financially responsible for aging parents and relatives. So that's a huge issue that's going to be more and more pertinent over the next 5 to 10 years. But yeah, the big beautiful bill, I mean, it is going to be a nightmare for rural America. I just fear that we're not going to see the effects in person until it's too late.
Yeah, there is a lot of, when the big beautiful bill came out and it was announced that all of the negatives didn't come out until after the midterms, or even after, not until 2028 in some cases. um it was just, you it was rough knowing that you knew why they were doing it in the first place, because when they knew that the Democrats had a better chance of taking back at minimum the House in 2026, so they could use that as an argument, or they knew that there was a chance that a Democrat could win the presidency, just like with the current tax plan that we're under, which is the Trump tax plan. For 4 years, everyone called it the Biden tax plan, and it's just like, no, if you have problems with the tax plan, you can thank the guy that you like so much.
Oh, 100%. The way I liken it, especially when I'm talking about the few small tax benefits that are in this bill, is it's like crumbs off of a banquet table for working class people. And I get really frustrated talking about tax plans because really the right has been doing the same thing for the last 50 years. They keep cutting the top tax rates, the corporate tax rates. They fail to properly tax capital gains. They've created so many loopholes that the vast amount of wealth in this country is never taxed. And yet, working class people have to account for every penny, every dime, and pay out 35%. We pay so much in taxes that we should already have these essential services taken care of. We should have healthcare. We should have education. We should be able to take care of our aging population. All of these things we can perfectly afford to take care of,
Yeah.
but they keep funneling trillions of dollars into kind of this top 1% or into these monopolized corporate industries through that tax bracket. So I think one of the things I dream about, at least when I am elected, is being able to go to DC and really finally rewrite a tax code
Mm.
that allows working class families to not shoulder the bag, and then on top of that pay out of pocket for all of these essential services that every other free nation in the world is able to take care of.
Yeah.
But yeah, the big beautiful bill is just another excuse for them to do this. But we saw a hint of this. A lot of people didn't realize, I think it was 2023. 2023, it might have been summer of 2024. It all kind of blends together at this point. But at the time, there was a bill that would increase the child tax credit.
Yeah.
This was huge. It would have funneled money to over 88,000 rural children in my district alone, and it was paired with R&D tax credits for corporations. So it was mutually beneficial for both the industries in my state and working class families. And our congressmen pushed this bill so far down the line, and they told these corporate industries, listen, give us till 2025 and we can go ahead and do the R&D tax credits without bumping up the child tax credit as much as this bill would allow. So once again, it's just backroom handshake deals, and we end up being the loss. And yeah, the child tax credit increased microscopically, but nowhere near as much as the tax breaks for the monopolized industries that have priced out small business in my state.
Yeah. What is your biggest fear for Idaho residents if your opponent was to win?
You know, my fear used to be the same, I think, as everybody else's, which is that it was going to be even harder for working class families to make it, harder for our schools to function, harder for our hospitals to make it. But I think that we're dealing with a much different fear now,
Hmm.
that we are dealing with an administration, and my opponent is in full support of everything that is happening right now. That is completely the idea that we're going to privatize veterans care, the idea that we're rewriting our military ethos to become a country based on war again, just completely demolishing the foreign diplomacy that it's taken us over 20 years to try and get and navigate through. The idea that we're going to be in another conflict in the Middle East. The idea that they have completely eradicated the checks and balances that, you know, made it so the president couldn't run for a third or fourth or fifth term. The idea that all of these independent oversight committees that protected everyday Americans from corporate industries or from corporate greed are now gone. So I think now we're dealing with a much bigger fear, which is, are we going to have the democratic principles that allowed our republic to survive this long over the next 10 years? And that I can't promise.
It looks like we have someone running for Congress in Georgia in the chat.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So how, I mean, obviously you're aware, we, unless the news has magically changed in the last few hours, it's pretty much a given that the government is shutting down in 4 hours and 18 minutes. How do you see? So there's an argument going through with a lot of people, especially in the Democratic side. There's a lot that we actually were talking about it this morning in our in the live. There's a lot of people, a lot of Democrats that are actually like, let it shut down because they were upset about Schumer and the Democrats giving in March during that CR fight. And how do you see the government shutting down not only affecting Idaho but affecting Democrats?
This is a hard one. The first place that I think to, because this almost happened last cycle, and my opponent was one of the Republicans who voted against the CR motion that would have kept the government open. And what I saw happening in Idaho were federal employees who aren't getting paid. I know that they've kind of drafted all of these things in. But the idea right now is, and in Idaho, they're pushing this really hard, that it's Democrats' fault, that they're trying to fund health care for undocumented people in the country, and all of this kind of nonsense.
Which they aren't. I just want to put that out. They aren't.
They are not. I think the only clause that they're grabbing onto there is life-saving measures that would allow emergency personnel to provide life-saving measures.
Which they always.
This is America, and we're not supposed to allow people to die in our streets. That's just, but it's just the constant deflection. Nothing is ever their responsibility. My opponent is actually in a really privileged position right now because he's been on the Trump train since day one. My opponent has been pro MAGA, 100% Trump since Trump's first day, and he has ridden that train all the way in. So he actually has quite a bit of leverage and authority and position in DC. He has the president's ear. So this is not just some no name that can't really get anything accomplished. They could if they wanted to.
Yeah.
And I don't think we should let the government shut down. And I understand that. I understand that want to, but we really need to be dealing with the issues that are in committee, the issues that are on the floor. We don't want to allow, because once these Republicans leave the House floor, they're not thinking about work. They're not going to be addressing any of these issues. We keep them in DC to try and hold them accountable. And so it's a hard question because I understand why Democrats are saying that, but I just don't see the value.
It feels like a catch-22. That is for sure. there is no right or wrong answer in terms of, um, no matter what, people are getting hurt. And I can only speak from what I've seen. From a lot of people that I have interacted with, we have all felt that there hasn't been much fight from the leadership
Yeah.
since January 20th. All talk, all strongly worded letters, but nothing else. And I think if we had had that feeling of them fighting back, I think there would have been less of a desire for this. I think this just feels, at least to many people, like it's the only power we have right now, since we don't have the House, we don't have the Senate, we don't have the presidency. So
Right.
it's not easy. And again, we were having like, oh, in a perfect world, we'd sign this CR and then see what happened in 7 weeks. But I just, yeah, that's not an easy
I
one.
well, and this is one of the questions I get so often, especially from people who have legitimate concerns about, I have never been an elected official. So how am I as a freshman going to go back to DC and have the kind of impact, that Fulcher has? And one, I point out that the man didn't get a single bill passed for the 7.5 years that he was in positions of privilege. But I do really think that the Democrats have failed to look at the bigger picture in the way that the conservative right has for the last 5 decades. I mean, really, this all started in the 80s with the Council for National Policies, when
Yeah.
you saw Reagan partner with the oil lobby, the Pew Pew lobby, the evangelical church, and Jerry Falwell. I mean, really, they've been looking at the bigger picture and playing chess for the last 4 decades, and we have not been adequately working against those efforts.
Yeah.
And so my hope is that, one, luckily I've seen this in Idaho, and I've seen the bigger picture, and a lot of my background is in academically understanding how this has come to pass, is that I can really bring everybody who is opposed to an authoritarian state together, so that we can actually be one step ahead for the first time. But that means that we need to be looking at who is proposing what committees are they going through, where do we have and thankfully there are a few people working in that aspect across the country, and we've seen that be successful as a strategy for the last 6 months. But yeah, we have to start thinking ahead.
Totally 100% agree. But we also have the problem of, it's very hard to think ahead when you're struggling and suffering in the moment. So again, there are days it feels like a catch-22, and I do not envy the position that you have been put in, because I can imagine that there are days where it feels like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And I could say, at least to everyone in the chat, one thing that I've appreciated about talking with you is, any question that I have asked you, you have never twisted around it. You've answered it directly. And I think that is something that we are sorely missing right now in politics. Um, I can almost guarantee most of the people in my community we've all watched videos together where they have been asked a direct question and they will not answer it. They answer the question with a question. Or they just talk about something else, or they just ignore it altogether. And I think, and we talked about it in the podcast episode a bit, but you can go more into it. One of the things that we want is politicians that are willing to be accountable, to take responsibility for their choices. If you want to just let everyone know kind of your stance on that.
Yeah. I will say there is a funny anecdote, a little behind the scenes to campaigning, that a lot of, I'm not a politician. I've never been an elected official. I don't work with some big consulting firm. I'm an Idaho woman who loves government and policy. I'm a big nerd, right? And traveling up and down the state, that has been my benefit. That's why I work with rural communities so well, because I'm just talking about what I know and trying to learn as much as I can. However, one of the things that hurts us is I have always been a speaker. I've always spoken the way that I speak now. I was a debate kid. I was a public speaker when I was like 11 and 12 years old. And it hurts me because I sound more polished than I actually
Mm,
am. So I remember when I first started and I would go really into the policy and people would think I was reading off of a teleprompter, or they'd be like, oh, that's polished. And I was like, I have spoken like this my whole life. So ironically, it's one of the things that hurts us a little bit in image is the way that I talk. However, the one thing that I really, really want to accomplish is to make the government accountable to the people again. And that's why it's the very top of my platform, which is none of our checks and balances have worked out. We have learned that no matter what a politician does, there's no actual consequences or enforcement. And they have now realized this. So we have politicians running amok, breaking rules left and right, who do nothing for their constituents. And there's
yeah.
nothing we can do to get them out because they're going to be voted in just based on the letter next to their name. So the top of my platform has always been banning congressional stock trades, term limits, because I think it is a short-term solution that would address the issues that we have right now. Even though it means we'll lose good leaders in good spots, I do think that it's the only thing that immediately could address one of the issues that we have.
Yeah.
And then completely reworking our elections process and campaign finances. Australia just had a big push, but I do not think that large special interest, corporate PACs, dark money should even be possible in our election system. I think you should have to be accountable for every single penny that you get into a campaign and get out. But that also means being creative. I think that there are solutions that nobody's even offered yet. I think we need oversight and enforcement. I think that if you break a rule in Congress, then there should be an immediate removal or suspension or some kind of process in which there are consequences for your actions. And that's something I'm really excited about because I haven't seen anything drafted yet. And I think that might eventually become my personal passion project, is creating that enforcement mechanism. Because there's so much anger right now, and we've talked about this, and I just want to punch up. I really want to hold those who are responsible for what's happening right now accountable in a real way.
Yeah. By the way, everyone's going, amen, girlfriend. Yes, yes, yes. So I'd say everyone is excited about that. Just for anyone new who came in, we've got a little bit more time. If there's any questions that you want to ask Kaylee, just throw in the chat and it will get to us so we can ask her while we still have a little bit of time. Trying to think what. Oh, did you see the news today? That Trump's another announcement about the pharmaceutical. He wants to start Trump RX. I guess he's made a deal with Pfizer and wants a federally run place for people to buy pharmaceuticals.
Because that's just what we need. A very innocent and non-corrupt pharmaceutical industry to be partnering with a corrupt political process. That'll solve all of our problems.
Yeah.
I think and one of the things my opponent says all the time that drives me nuts is whenever there's a question about housing or prescription prices, he has this response and he says it every time. He's like, we need to let the free market deal with this. We need to let the free market, because you don't want the collective we handling this problem. But what we're currently dealing with is a supposedly free market. However, it's not free because the government already chose the winner. Like, we have allowed the complete monopolization of essential industries, including pharmaceutical, health insurance. So there is no competition that allows consumers
Yeah.
an affordable price. And I think the Trump RX, this idea, one, I miss the good old days of Jimmy Carter, like quitting, giving up his peanut farm for a conflict of interest, right? The idea that we have a president bringing in as many lucrative kind of business deals to himself and his family is atrocious in the first place. But what I think we ultimately need to do is get for profit companies out of essential life saving care, because it would be cheaper for American taxpayers to have completely free healthcare access and prescriptions than what we currently pay both in taxes and out of pocket. So yeah, this Trump RX doesn't surprise me, but it's just another nightmare that's not going to work for anybody.
So we got two others. We have one an Idahoan in chat who's wondering about vouchers for schools.
This was big. This just passed in
Okay.
the state of Idaho. So this is a big, unfortunately, what we're seeing is them using the state, right, state politics
Yeah.
and state legislation to pass this. I think that we should, at the federal level, completely ban the potential for tax dollars to go to private education institutions. It's just outrageous. What they did is they passed a $50 million voucher scheme. And of course, now the governor is saying that there's a massive budget deficit and he's asking schools to cut 3% out of their already shoestring budgets. So this is a nightmare. But what's been fascinating for me is seeing where this legislation comes from, because it comes from the DeVos Foundation. You have these really giant billionaire interests that funneled millions into trying to pass these voucher schemes in states like Idaho. And what we've seen across the country is that they are way more expensive than they were proposed, that private schools that would have been an option for low-income students using the voucher increased their tuition. So now those voucher amounts no longer cover their tuition prices, and that 90% of the students who use these voucher bills or use these voucher kind of payments were already high income, well educated students. And in a place like Idaho, a lot of, I live in the Treasure Valley, which is around our capital, right? You have Boise, which is the only real blue kind of city in the state.
Yeah.
And I'm about 30 minutes outside. So I am in an area that does actually have quite a few charter schools and things like that. But you go throughout the rest of my district, there is no school choice in rural America. There is one public school that children are struggling even to get to or get access to or get bus systems to. This is just completely draining potential funding out of rural schools and giving it to private, often Christian religious organizations. And there's a statistic that gets used. Well, public education, we're throwing good money after bad. It's just not working. But that's after they spent the last 20 years defunding public education.
Yeah.
So you can't continue to defund something and then complain that it doesn't work. But private schools are able to choose their students. If a student has behavioral issues, they're kicked out. If a student doesn't have the right GPA, they can kick them out to keep their numbers good. And they use that all the time. Private institutions are more successful. But there was a study done, and I love this, and I wish everybody was talking about it. The most successful schools in America are actually government-run schools on military bases. And this is because they are not funded through the Department of Education. They're funded through the Department of Defense. And they tend to have a much higher budget than public schools across the country. So it isn't that public education was in and of itself a mess. It's that our classrooms were overcrowded, our teachers were underpaid, and leave no student behind was an absolute nightmare. Standardized testing just crushed teachers' ability to adapt to classrooms.
Yeah.
So yeah, the voucher bills are going to be disastrous and already have been.
The last comment that I think someone would be interested in your take on, Dems failed us when they took APAC money and ignored rural America.
100%. 100%. This falls into special interests completely taking the place of voter and constituent concerns. So my opponent is a big supporter of AIPAC. He's been a big supporter of Netanyahu uh, this entire time. I refuse. I will never take a penny from anybody that expects anything from that money. I had a big donor. Obviously, the vast majority, like 90% of my money comes from small individual donations. But there are a handful of bigger donors that give the max amount. And I had a max donor who wanted to write a check to my campaign. But I remember we were talking and I was telling him about my campaign, and he did a kind of tit for tat, like a quid pro quo comment about what he expected my focus to be. And I walked out. We need that level of integrity in every single candidate running. And
Yes.
and in everyone. I mean, it just should be, if you take dark money, you're out like immediately. So yes, I agree. I think that AIPAC has done some pretty terrible things in American politics, just like a lot of the dark money, special interests, big lobbies that control a lot of what goes to the House and Senate floor. So yeah, I agree.
Well, Kaylee, thanks for spending this time with us and letting us get to know you. Do you want to let everyone in chat know where they can find you if they want to help support you in any way possible?
Yeah, thankfully there are no other Kayleys running for Congress yet. I mean, hopefully we can change that and get some more at the table. But all of my information is available at Kaylee for Congress, FOR, all spelled out, KAYLEE, Congress.com is my website. At Gmail is my email. All of my social media is at Kaylee for Congress. I'm on, I think, every social media platform, but I'm also super accessible. So, I'm a grassroots candidate. I don't have a massive team talking for me online. If you have a question or any concerns, or you're in the state and you want me to come visit your area or community, just shoot me a message on social media and I'm there. I'm actually hitting the road in 2 days. I'll be driving up north, hosting events all across the state over the next 2 weeks. So yeah, if there's anybody across the state who wants to come to an event, just hit me up.
There you go. And if you're interested in hearing more, you can also watch the podcast episode where we interviewed Kaylee. It's over on YouTube. It was 3 episodes ago, so make sure to check that out. Her face is right on there. You can't miss it. Again, thank you for hanging out. Thanks for giving some time to get to know you. We need more candidates like you, and hopefully we will. This is just the start of an amazing time for you and for Idaho. And I know I can speak for me, but I can also tell just from a lot of people in chat, whatever we can do to help make it possible for you to get in office, I think you have the support of at least this community.
Thank you so much. All the people in the comments, by the way, you know this, I'm relatively new to TikTok lives. I'm just so grateful. I saw so many positive comments in the chat, and I'm thankful for the platform, Mike. It's always great being able to talk about what's happening here. I look forward to it. Hopefully there's some good news coming up soon and I can catch you up on it.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely, whether it's an episode or a live, we'll definitely get you back on. And then once you're Congresswoman, then we'll can hear even more. Thank you again. Everyone, thanks for being on here. Please go over and check out the YouTube. There's a lot of amazing stuff over there, not just talking with Kaylee. We're doing a lot of amazing things over there, talking with a lot of different groups of people. We're really trying to push having conversations, moving forward, doing the important things. What we did here, what Kaylee has been willing to do, answer hard questions, and just be honest and open and willing to learn and willing to be wrong. And those are the kind of things that we need. So if you are not part of the YouTube over there, please consider doing it. We also have a Discord. We also have a Substack. For everyone here, I will see you tomorrow morning. Kaylee, thanks you once again. And we look forward to seeing what comes of your campaign. Thank you, everyone. You guys are amazing, just the way you are. And I love you all very much. Stay safe, stay healthy. Remember to sing, laugh, dance, and smile. Do something that makes you happy. Bye, guys.